Uh-oh, everyone. Welcome back to Nails Before Films. Today, I'll be going through how I made the Starlord and Rocket nails for my Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 movie review video. Link in the description. Again, this isn't really a tutorial, I'm just going through how I did the nails, so please comment below if you have any suggestions for me. Anyway, let's get right into it. First, the supplies. Again, no sponsor. I used Apres Gel X Natural Almond Short Size 5.5 again for my ring fingers. To prepare the nails, file off the prickly ends using a 100 grit file and buff the surface with a 180 grit file to remove the shine. Next, for the base color. It's a bit different this time. For Starlord, I again used 2 coats of Matte & Glam's Smelly Cat Gel Polish, but for Rocket, obviously he doesn't have human skin, he's a freaking raccoon, so I used Seaweed's Gingerbread for his face. For Rocket, after applying 2 coats of gel polish, I used Golden Fluid Acrylic's Carbon Black to outline the top of his head and his ears. I wasn't happy with the position of his head I drew at first, so I drew another line above that original curve and wiped off the original one with alcohol. Next, the fur above his eyes is white, sort of like his brows, so I painted the white part first to get a better idea of where his eyes and nose would be. Similarly, the fur around his muzzle is also white, so I put white gouache on the area where his nose and mouth would go. His cheeks also have white fur, so I put some white on the sides too. After putting on the white, I used black again to draw his eyes, nose, and mouth. His eyes are just below the white brows, overlapping the white slightly. Also, because Rocket's personality is more brash, I added 2 slightly angled straight lines above his eyes to give him a sharper look. After I was done with drawing the features with black, I added 2 small white dots in the upper left of his eyes as reflections. Because I didn't like how thick the outlines of his ears were, I thought they should be a bit flatter, so I wiped them off and redrawn the outlines. That's another good thing about using acrylic paint. You can wipe them off with alcohol if you don't like what you've drawn. You can wipe off gel if it's not cured, but once you've cured it, the best you can do is file it off, but you could damage the base color when you're doing it. Next, after redrawing his ears, I mixed up some brown that was darker than the base color and dabbed it on the empty space on his face with a larger brush. Normally, we don't want to cover the white with brown, right? But here we actually want to overlap the brown paint with the white slightly. By doing so, the fur will look more natural. If his face is just chunks of white and brown that don't interfere with each other, it wouldn't look like fur. And instead of painting the brown, dabbed it on with the brush to create a more natural fur look. Most importantly, dab the brown paint on the black outline of the top of his head to the point that the black is barely visible. This will give him a furry look, much better than just drawing a smooth outline. I then used some black to better define his ears and the top of his head. However, instead of drawing smooth lines like I did before, I used short strokes to create that furry look. Next, I added some lighter brown to the space between his eyes, leading up to the white part of his muzzle. Again, use short strokes to make it look more fur-like. I then used some white to draw his whiskers. Lastly, I touched up some of the white and black to make his brow and smile look more defined. And that's basically it. Rocket's face is done. Because they're the Guardians of the Galaxy, I wanted to make the empty space above Rocket's head look galaxy-like. First, I used Seaweed's 3-step Mirage to paint the space. After curing it, I added Ugly Duckling's color gel number 051, which is the glittery white. Because I only put on a thin coat of the color gel, the white was almost transparent, but the glitter effect was still there. After curing it, I think the result looked pretty good. It looked pretty galaxy-like. Anyway, apply top coat over the entire nail, cure, and it's done. However, I think I should have used the blue gel polish as the base color instead of the brown. The gingerbread gel polish base was practically gone in the final nail, so there was really no point in using it as the base color. I should have painted the whole nail with blue, painted Rocket's face with acrylic paint, and added the glittery white last. I didn't think about the background before I started painting the nail, and I thought the gingerbread color would still be visible on his face, but I ended up covering most of it with acrylic paint. Oh well, that's how you learn to be better next time. Next, for Starlord's face, I started out with his hair with the lighter brown paint. After covering the area of his hair with the lighter brown, I brushed on some darker brown for the look of his hair. Then, because I wanted his face to look uneasy and worried, I drew one of his brows higher than the other with light brown. After drawing the brows, I used black to outline his eyes and put the furrows between his brows. I thought his hairline looked a bit too high, so I added some light brown to lower his hairline and again brushed on some darker brown for his hair. Then I filled in the white for his eyes, put some green in the middle for his iris, and added small black dots for his pupils. I did this a couple of times until I was happy with the look. After finishing his eyes, I used black to draw his nose. I started with his nostrils to know where the bottom of his nose was, and then finished the whole nose by outlining the shape and the bridge of his nose. The next stop is his mouth. I drew a slight frown with black first and then added white in the middle as his teeth. Again, I did this several times until I was happy with how his mouth looked. After his mouth, I drew his beard with light brown. I basically filled the space between his nose and mouth with the light brown, added some strokes down his chin, and dabbed a little of the paint on the side. Okay, so for this next part, I wasn't happy with his hair after finishing his face. I thought the hairline should be higher. I know I thought it was too high before, which is why I added more hair, but I thought it was too low after drawing the face. Also, I thought the color should be darker overall, so I used a darker brown than before as the base for his hair, brushed an almost black brown on top, and brushed the brown on top again to create the look of his hair. However, now that I've re-examined the nail, I think the first look was better. I shouldn't have changed it. Or maybe the whole thing just looked kind of weird because the almond shape made his face look too pointy. That's basically how I did these two nails. I like the movie, but it has its problems and I'm not sure they know where to go from here, which was why I made Starlord do a weird face. Anyway, you can always check out my full review if you're interested. Again, you can always change things up. Maybe use a different nail tip shape so that Starlord's face won't look so pointy, like coffin or round. I personally didn't mind because I wanted him to look weird. Hope you guys find this video helpful. I've listed the supplies I used in the description. If you have any questions or suggestions for me, feel free to leave them in the comments. As always, like, subscribe, comment, share, do what you want. Keep nailing it and check out my Guardians of the Galaxy 3 movie review if you haven't yet, people.